I've become obsessed with these Chinese drama shorts. They're so absurd. You always have one good heroine, half the people are just inexplicably evil, and the drama is always cranked up to a 10. Somebody is always either pregnant or hiding their identity or both. It's great. I don't want to sound like I'm making fun of these shows, although I'm sure it'll sound like it. I just really enjoy them and want to talk about it. Warning, this review is very spoiler heavy, but the story is great and I strongly encourage you to watch it anyway. Today I want to talk about one video in particular. I saw a clip of it initially on Facebook, and the website that posted it is called Short TV. They have an app where it hosts a bunch of these series where each episode is like a minute each. I don't know if you've ever run across these ads, but they never have the actual title for the show. Different users will post the same series over and over again, and half the time they don't even tell you where to find it. You have to check the comments and hope that someone who saw the clip recognized it and left the name. If no one has yet, then I'll usually try to search it with the premise, which can give you interesting results. The name for the series I want to talk about today is called Return of the Invincible Commander, although I found it uploaded on YouTube under the title English sub. This woman is a general who fought in the battlefield, but husband has taken credit. Very apt, but not quite accurate. Of course, it's better than English sub. The concubine was transformed into a royal princess and she had a princely fiance. Or English sub. As a concubine, she supported an unknown soldier to reach the top of the Arch Championship. These are all titles of the same series that was re-uploaded on the same channel. I'm not sure where the series originally came from, like which company made it. I'm assuming that information just isn't available in English, or maybe I'm dumb, I don't know. But if someone can figure it out and let me know, I'll put it in the pinned comment. Before we go into the actual premise of the show, I gotta talk about all the different intros I've seen in advertisements.
The little boy just peed on the ground. Unexpectedly, huge white smoke came out of the ground, and suddenly a dragon emerged from the ground. It turned out that the little boy's unintentional move actually released the little dragon girl, who had been sealed for thousands of years out. 10 years later.
There are a ton, just for this one show, and none of them were in the version that I watched.
A woman was raped by her husband's brother. When her husband found out, he spurned her and wanted to divorce her.
They're all different, so I don't know if any of them were actually in the show, but certainly all of them were not. This one is my favorite.
This woman gave birth to 3 babies in the sky. The god quickly caught one of them, and the god of earth also held the second one, but the third one fell into the world. 18 years later.
I kind of want to watch whatever shows or movies these came from because they look awesome. Return of the Invincible Commander is a historical drama. I couldn't figure out exactly when it takes place. In this series, they say the Emperor is part of the Shah dynasty in the subtitles, which I'm certain is a westernized version of the name. All of the names are westernized, actually, although this is the least egregious example. The protagonist is Grace Moore, her husband is Sean York, his mistress is Sophia, her brother is Daniel. There's a general named Nathan, whose last name I can't remember because they just kept calling him Mr. Nathan. Maybe Nathan was his last name, I don't know.
南宫廷里国女帅大人到来前，南宫大人马上就要来了。南宫大人老人家来了，
真是侮辱南宫统领，刺杀当朝武状元。南宫大人，您刚刚也看见了。南宫大人，你可要为我们做主啊！
大人，属下苏德雅。
南宫晴。
Oh, Nathan Kingsley. All the characters are given these names that don't particularly fit, especially because this is a historical drama. How much contact would these characters have had with Western peoples, especially to the extent that they would have taken Western first and last names? When I googled the Shah dynasty, what pulled up was the Shah dynasty,
Shah,
which makes sense. If this is the correct time frame, that means that this story would have taken place between 2070 BCE and 1600 BCE. They would not have had Western names. It's like in Sailor Moon, the English version that I watched as a kid. They changed Usagi's name to Serena. I guess they thought Usagi was too difficult for Westerners to pronounce, although I personally think the more people are exposed to different languages, the more likely it is that we'll be able to pronounce names from those languages. In this ever more connected world that we're living in, we encounter people with non-Western names more and more frequently, and instead of complaining about how we can't pronounce them, maybe we should familiarize ourselves with the sounds of those languages and learn to pronounce the names of those around us. I mean, the fact that I, as an American, can sit here and watch a Chinese drama and create a video to broadcast out to the world where people in, I don't know, Australia can watch, shows that these barriers are crumbling. I mean, nobody in Australia is going to watch this, nobody at all probably will, but they could. And that's my point. In this story, there's a woman, Grace Moore, who's our titular invincible commander. The first thing we see is Grace, our protagonist, washing laundry with her young son Ian nearby. She detects something and sends Ian inside, then calls out the lurker she sensed and is immediately attacked. This is in the first 30 seconds of the video, by the way. I know this short format means a lot may happen in a very brief period of time, but this really threw me. I thought the fight scene looked good and was well choreographed, but it was chillingly silent. There are no sound effects in these series, just vocals and occasionally music. No background noise, no footsteps, not even the swish of a sword. And this bit where she summons the wet laundry is begging for a sound effect. Often when nobody is talking, it's just completely silent. I don't think all of these C-drama shorts are like that. I don't even know if the original upload had sound effects, since I'm pretty sure what I watched was a re-upload, but I can say that it was kind of jarring. In an exposition dump, we learn that for the past 7 years, Grace has somehow been hiding the fact that she's the commander from her husband, who is a general in the same army. He's literally her employee. He didn't know. We see her discussing with Mr. Nathan that she wanted to give her husband, Sean York, a promotion, 3 armies, a golden set of armor, and the Phoenix Spear, which she calls from the heavens. Will he be able to call the spear now? Again, this scene is begging for a sound effect.
凤凰明天
Tell me if you buy this. She says that she hid her identity from her husband because he was poor and she didn't want to burden him with her identity. She didn't give up her job as a commander. No. She just decides to hide it from him. A sign of a healthy marriage. She orders for a banquet to be prepared for her husband the next day to celebrate his promotion that she gave him because she's his boss, and says she'll reveal her true identity to him then. In the next scene, her newly promoted husband Sean then comes home, apparently completely unaware of the career that his wife has had for the entirety of their marriage. He brings his mistress, Sophia, to introduce to his wife, mother, and son. Grace doesn't know that he's been having an affair just yet, though. She just thinks that Sophia is a guest. His mother, whose name I don't remember, and honestly it doesn't even matter, has been living with Grace and Ian while Sean was at war and apparently hates Grace, so she's happy that her son has found someone else. The meeting goes terribly and lasts all of 2 minutes before her husband, who I reiterate has just returned from war, leaves again. The mistress is a snob, Sean is a jerk who is rude to his wife and ignores his son, and the mother scolds Grace for making a bad impression on Sophia. A lot of the characters in these dramas are just cartoonishly evil. We haven't seen it so much yet, but it's ridiculous how non-human they are in their evilness. There's no backstory, no explanation, they just suck and we don't know why. After this terrible encounter, Grace is glad that he hasn't left her. I guess she did know that the woman he brought was his mistress. After that debacle, though, I would be questioning if I even want to stay married. I mean, she clearly didn't need him. The next day, we see Grace and Ian walking towards the restaurant for Sean's celebratory dinner. There was a hint that I didn't mention in the first scene of Grace being an orphan and looking for her long-lost family. As they're going, they walk past a carriage carrying someone who I think is her missing brother, although that doesn't come up again for a while. We see Sean arrive at the restaurant with Sophia, and Grace and Ian arrive shortly after. Sean goes up on the stage to make an announcement where he praises the help he received from a very important woman in his life. And through the aristocrats at the party, we see just how much Grace did for Sean that he knows about. Neither Sean nor the aristocrats know that Grace is also the commander and has been doing a lot of other things behind the scenes to help. Even with what we do know, though, it seems really fucked up that he would put her aside the way he's about to. I love how right now the aristocrats are singing Grace's praises. Remember that. None of this matters, though, because of course he's singing the praises of his mistress Sophia and not his wife. He credits her with providing him intel on the enemy while he was at war, but we, the audience, know that that was actually Grace. He announces that Sophia is pregnant and they're getting married before divorcing Grace in front of a room full of people, including their child. What a guy. Also, they say Grace gave all her money to the war effort for Sean, which means that she had her own money that wasn't connected to him. Remember, she said in the beginning that he was poor when she met him. She says later that she was also poor when they met. Where did he think she got this money from? Again, she was functionally an orphan, and Sean says at a few different points that all she knows is housework. The first of these short dramas I watched was about a billionaire's daughter who hid her identity from her husband for 3 years before he, without learning her identity, divorces her for another woman who's pregnant. Incredibly different, I know. I'd link it for you because I liked it too, but I can't find it again. found is definitely still an issue though.
大家慢点，慢点骑，再见。
In that one, the protagonist took forever to reveal her secret identity. Even when it was glaringly obvious who she really was, she still denied it to her ex-husband and his family. I like that in this one, she reveals herself right away. It doesn't matter though, because nobody believes her. There's another comically evil moment where Sean tries to humiliate Grace. The aristocrats who were singing Grace's praises earlier immediately jump on the bandwagon with Sean. If I saw someone behaving the way that Sean was, I would be disgusted. But the people at the party are acting like his behavior is perfectly normal, and Grace is the bad one. It's interesting because there is definitely some sexism displayed by the other characters. Yet Grace was the commander, seemingly the highest-ranking military official. They didn't know the commander was Grace, but they did know that it was a woman. It just makes me wonder what kind of society this is. Grace accepts the divorce and then, of course, takes back everything that she just gave him. The promotion, the spear, the armies, the house. Did I mention the house? There was also a house. Not that it matters, though, because of course he lost it before he even had the chance to step foot in it. She makes this order and someone runs outside and sends up the bat signal, which summons General Nathan, who we saw at the beginning and knows that Grace is the commander. This raises another question. Has this guy with the bat signal been following her around just waiting for an order? How did nobody notice him before? At this point, she's all but said she's the commander. Nobody believes her, which I guess I get. I mean, they don't really have a reason to. Yet. Grace ascends the stage to take back the Phoenix Spear and is stopped by Sophia threatening to kill little Ian. Sean seems apprehensive at first, but after all of 3 minutes, she convinces him that not only should Ian die, but Sean should be the one to kill him. May I remind you that Ian is Sean's own 7-year-old son? The best part? They did this to impress the commander, who was right in front of them, and also the mother of the child that they were threatening. Mr. Nathan comes, and Grace uses the distraction to summon the Phoenix Spear through the air and between Sean and Ian, saving her son's life. Grace's now ex-husband, his mistress, his mother, and all the aristocrats try to convince Mr. Nathan to kill Grace for being disrespectful and trying to kill Sean. They even offer to help. How sweet. You know, I can't help but think that if Grace genuinely wanted to kill Sean, she would have been able to do it. Mr. Nathan, of course, knows that Grace did in fact have the power to give the orders she gave and tries to shut them up. He ends up beheading Daniel, Sophia's brother, before kneeling before Grace and calling her the commander. He offers to take care of the guests in the room and asks her to take a seat. The aristocrats object because the seat is for the commander. They still don't get it. Don't worry, I'll save the suspense. They never get it. Not after Mr. Nathan formally revokes Sean's titles, not after the 4 warlords kneel before Grace and let her melt down the golden armor, not even after she kicks Sean's ass because she's the better fighter. Not even after she has Sophia's whole family killed and Sophia exiled. Not even after Mr. Nathan presented an order with Grace's signature that he brought with him and had already started executing 3 days prior.
大人，是我错了，是我有眼无珠，我真的不知道你是大人物。
They get it.
虽然我没见过女帅他人家真面目，但是女帅喜欢我武功了得，人尽皆知，怎么可能是因为你？
No, he doesn't. No, Grace can't possibly be the commander. She must be Mr. Nathan's mistress.
他也太便宜他，杀我哥哥，等凤鸣君一到，扒他们的皮，抽他们的骨，让他们碎尸万段。
See? Cartoonishly evil. Sean and Sophia keep saying they need to be killed. I don't know who the they, Sean and Sophia, are talking about, but it sounds like they mean Grace and Ian, who, as you recall, is just a child. Meanwhile, we see Grace's long-lost brother George telling his auntie that he found Grace, and somehow they know that she's at the restaurant where the aristocrats are threatening to kill her and her child. He rushes to the restaurant and then proceeds to sit outside for another 20 minutes for some reason.
苏小姐和王小姐没有资格，那老夫作为御史大夫，官拜正3品，有没有资格株连你？
吴动，
I'm sorry, but this is kind of boss. Also, why are you asking if you can kill her? Obviously, she's gonna say no. Eventually, Sean calls the guards that were apparently there the whole time. Why didn't they stop him before? He orders them to kill Grace, Nathan, and Ian. Those fuckers. See? Cartoonishly evil. When it comes to Sean and his mom, we know their motivations. They want power. If Sean and his mother were poor, then it makes sense that they would want to rise above their station. Rising at the cost of their humanity, though, does require some explanation. But if that's true, then a lot of these characters are just evil. Maybe that's just how the creators of these dramas view the world. Grace reflects on her life with Sean. She says he was a shitty husband and father. He doesn't care. She says his kung fu is amateurish. How dare. I don't even know why Sophia would want someone who so clearly only cares about status. Sure, she's a royal merchant's daughter, so she has higher status than what they thought Grace's status was, but she's not the highest. She also knows firsthand that he's unfaithful to his wife since he had an affair with her. He even offers for Grace to be his mistress after divorcing her once he knows that she has some status. As soon as what Sean deems as a better prospect crosses his path, he's going to be out of there, and she's going to be alone with their baby. If he doesn't decide that that kid should be killed too, that is. We get some more backstory and find out that Grace has known Sean for 20 years. 20 years! Since they were children, she would have built her whole career around knowing him. How did he not know? She also apparently taught him martial arts. With the money she accumulated and donated to his cause, he had to have known that something was up. Or maybe he was just that bad of a husband that was completely oblivious. At this point, I wouldn't be surprised. Earlier in the show, we get a flashback, and it looks like Grace and Sean had a love marriage. But now she says that his father gave her food when she was starving, and what she invested in him was a way to pay him back. I'm sure both can be true. Either way, she's returned the favor and he spit in her face. Now she's done with him. Sean is arrested and removed from the restaurant, and we're left with Grace and the aristocrats. The aristocrats side with Grace now. They blame everything that happened earlier on Sean and Sophia. They apologize to Grace and say they'll do anything for her forgiveness. She asks for them to chop off their hands. They refuse to do it and try to swing their dicks as aristocrats and decide again that Grace is in fact not the commander.
依我看，他根本就没有什么了不得的身份，能号令四大战将，怕也是因为南宫统领的缘故吧。
Seriously? They think that Grace had the authority she did for her orders earlier in the evening because she's Mr. Nathan's mistress. I would fuck so many men if it gave me that kind of power. Grace says she'll prove that she's the commander by destroying their families. She orders the Phoenix Army to arrest the aristocrats' families, sending the men to the border and women into slavery. One guy says only the commander can command the Phoenix Army. That'll be pretty good proof then, won't it? And that is what you asked for.
那就
The army immediately walks through the doors with the detained families, battered and bruised. Right at that moment, Prince George finally deems it appropriate to enter the restaurant that he's just been sitting outside of while everything was happening. Oops, he's not the prince. He's the Southern King, and he tells everyone that Grace can do as she pleases because she's the princess that went missing 20 years prior. He also says that she's his fiancée, not his sister. The Southern King produces a white jade moon charm that matches one that Grace has. She puts them together and is flooded with memories of what happened the night she was separated from her family. She remembers and calls him Brother George, but then asks about her mother and brother, who are the Dowager and Emperor of Shaw respectively. Is he her brother and her fiancé? The aristocrats agree to kill themselves and surrender their assets to save their families. And this part is over. With the word of the Southern King, the aristocrats accept Grace as the princess, but I have to wonder, do they still think she's not the commander? Another chillingly silent montage. This time she's getting ready. King George doesn't know that Grace is the commander, but doesn't question how she got the power to do what she did. The aristocrat said right in front of him that the 4 warlords bowed down to her, but he doesn't seem to ask any questions about it. At this point, everybody who knew, or at least should have known, that Grace was the commander is dead, save for Sean and Sophia. And I guess the Phoenix Army, but they always knew. For some reason, she decides to hide her occupation from her brother and mother, the Emperor and Empress Dowager. And George, but he's not as dense as everyone else and seems to figure it out. There are a couple of scenes of romantic tension between Grace and George. Her mother suggests Grace continue their engagement, but Grace says she just wants to focus on Ian. Grace and George don't get together during the course of the show, but they do lay the groundwork for it. Grace meets her mother for the first time in 20 years, and they have a rather touching reunion. The Dowager Empress explains how they were separated, but it really doesn't give a lot of context. It doesn't really matter, though. What does matter is Ian's terrible wig. Most of the costumes are great, but that wig is so obvious. But I guess a modern child wouldn't let their hair grow out as long as needed for the hairstyle he was given, or I guess a child would have worn at that time. The Empress Dowager announces that the commander is coming to the palace to meet them. She and the Emperor don't know that Grace is the commander. It's the same problem with Sean, only in reverse. She works for them and is high enough ranking that she would be invited to the palace and even have a dinner thrown in her honor. How could they not know? Next, we go into the dinner organized for the commander. There are princes and a princess there acting as ambassadors, and Sophia is there flirting with the Japanese prince/ambassador, right in front of Sean, who's too busy kissing his ass. He asks Sean if he can have Sophia, and Sean agrees. Remember, Sophia is pregnant with Sean's child. The Japanese ambassador has a Hitler mustache and is especially pervy. This series probably wasn't targeted to a Japanese audience. Grace walks in and Sean confronts her asking why she's there.
穆桂英，你什么身份可以出现在这等宫宴上？
Bitch, why are you here? He's not anybody anymore. Grace doesn't explain, but doles out some satisfying slaps.
今日之宴，定不让你好。
桂英，
最后说你别动。
The Southern King stops Sean from hitting Grace back. The Emperor and Empress Dowager walk into the room, and we see the Emperor for the first time. Grace is introduced to her brother, but I guess Sean doesn't hear because he's confused as to why Grace can talk to the Emperor. He still doesn't believe that Grace is the commander, despite all the evidence, which would allow her to talk to the Emperor even if she wasn't the Emperor's sister. The Japanese ambassador asks the Emperor where the commander is and why she hasn't arrived yet, hinting at her death. This is, of course, immediately after the Emperor arrived. I don't know if etiquette dictates that everyone else arrive before the Emperor, but if people were still arriving, then the commander wouldn't really be late. The Emperor doesn't seem too pressed about it and says she still has time. The ambassadors present their gifts to the commander: a bell, a broken dragon statue, and a sign that says useless warrior. They also insult the Emperor and Empress Dowager as they just kind of sit there helpless. The ambassadors want to take over the country and believe that the commander is dead, so the country is weak. It's weird that they think one person would make so much of a difference when China still has multiple armies to use against them. Side note, the 3 countries attending this banquet are Japan, Korea, and America. Why America? I don't know. Keep in mind the story takes place in 1600 BCE. Doing that math, that's over 3,600 years ago. Did the indigenous Americans have diplomatic ties to China that I've never heard about? After mocking China and its royal family, the ambassadors challenge them to a competition to see which country is superior. Except it's not like the Olympics where all 4 countries are competing against each other. It's the 3 of their countries competing against China. They decide to make the competition interesting and place a bet that if China loses all 3 rounds, then they have to surrender land, 60 cities, and Grace becomes the Japanese prince's 100th concubine. The subtitles call it a mistress, but the Empress Dowager calls it a marriage. The Japanese prince has somehow already prepared a carriage for her and has it brought in. It's a cage. I'm confused as to the balls these ambassadors have. I guess they feel strong banded together to a commanderless state, but they're still in China. They're surrounded by Chinese guards and soldiers. Honestly, I don't get why the Emperor puts up with them. Grace accepts the challenge on the Emperor's behalf and they listen to her. Why? They literally just met her. She assures them that she can handle the competition, but doesn't tell them she's the commander. No, that would be too easy. Grace volunteers herself to compete in the challenges, but King George offers to take her place. She says, "We competed just now. You still don't know who I am?" And he responds, "Well then, I shall witness the commander's ability." The aristocrats say a woman cannot compete, and Grace points out that the commander is also a woman, and that nobody else stepped up to take the challenges. The Emperor and Empress Dowager support her. The competition starts, and Grace looks amazing in her armor. She looks super cute in all her outfits, all 3 of them. The first competition is to shoot an arrow off of their competitor's head, which doesn't make any sense. If the shooter misses, then they lose, but they could also kill their opponent, in which case I guess they both lose. Why? It's just to up the ante, I'm sure, but it's silly. Sean says if Grace begs him, then he can help her beg the foreign princess for her freedom. Sophia also mocks Grace. Grace is the princess. Why are they so bold? Why are they even there? The American warrior shoots the apple off of Grace's head, and then it's her turn. Grace calls for the phoenix bow, and when the Emperor sees it, he realizes she's the commander. Nobody else does, though. I guess in addition to being cartoonishly evil, it seems many of these characters are also cartoonishly stupid. Grace decides to show off by wearing a blindfold, which she kind of has to. If she just shot the apple off the other guy's head, then it would have been a tie. This wasn't really a well thought out competition. If both archers are equally good, whoever goes second would always have an advantage because they would know what they need to beat. The American ambassador says his warrior is too valuable to lose, so he makes Sean take his place. Grace, of course, shoots the apple and wins the competition because she covered her eyes and made it more challenging. The next event begins, and the aristocrats beg again to have someone else compete in the competition. They say the Japanese fighter is better than all of the fighters in China. If they think that China is going to lose anyway, why does it matter? They announce the rules of the sword fighting challenge, and Japan says they should make it more interesting and fight to the death. Grace agrees. The challenge begins, and the Japanese fighter heckles Grace, saying she can surrender and be the Japanese prince's mistress, which is incorrect, since the agreement was that China had to lose all 3 competitions. And she already won the first one. People in the crowd are saying Grace can't fight as she's handily fighting the Japanese warrior. Of course she wins. She's beaten 2 out of the 3 events, and in theory, the whole competition should be over. Remember, it's all 3 countries against China. They win together and they lose together. But no, there's one more competition. The Japanese prince, Sean, and Sophia say Grace must have cheated, because how can a weak, useless woman beat Japan's top warrior? Hello, she's the commander. Why do they still not get it?
你们统统的干活，八个呀喽！本世子不是输不起，况且我们还没有输。
Korea is up next with a game of chess, except there's also a second person who will kill people on the other team. I didn't really understand her explanation until I saw it, and even then I still kind of don't. It looks like when one of the chess players loses a piece, then the soldiers off to the side have to fight. But like, does the fight change the outcome of the move? Did the fighters just line up to kill or be killed depending on what happened to their assigned chess piece? It doesn't even look like the chess players are paying attention to the fighters. The Korean ambassador says her country invented chess. The Empress Dowager says China invented it. Both are wrong, of course. It looks like it was invented in India in 600 CE, at least 2200 years after these events would have taken place. The Korean ambassador asks why no one agrees to compete alongside the princess. George, of course, agrees. The Korean ambassador says if they cannot compete, then they should surrender the land and cities now. What are the rules? If China loses, is it land and cities to each country? If they lose one, do they lose them all? Why are the stakes so high for China and literally no one else? The aristocrats again beg the emperor to surrender, and in Grace's impassioned response, we get more backstory as to how she got separated from her family. Invaders came, killed the emperor, and they were under foreign control for 8 years, with 300,000 casualties.
我泱泱大夏，子民14亿，如繁星之海，浩浩荡荡，怎可能赢不了这种小国？
Shaw has 1.4 billion people? Really? Even then? Then unknown, but I doubt it was in the billions. Now it's 1.4 billion, so that's probably where the number comes from. Does this story take place now? The chess match starts, and this is my favorite part.
起落，马二进三。
The Korean player loses so badly, he dies. He just dies. What, was it his pride?
你输了。
我这不可能，不可能！
死了？怎么可能？
How is this possible? The American ambassador seems too willing to pay his debt. Of course it's a trap. He tries to kill the royal family, something that obviously fails since they're surrounded by Chinese guards and soldiers. But it does mean we get more romantic tension between Grace and George as the attackers are handily stopped. The American prince says he'll kill the commander, and the Korean ambassador says they've just been buying time for their forces to arrive. Grace asks if they're afraid of the commander, and the American ambassador says the last time he met the commander was 7 years ago. So in theory, he should have known at least somewhat what she looks like. That's around the time that Grace married Sean and when Ian was born. After one last eerily silent fight scene, Grace calls to the Phoenix to stop an assassin from killing her family. Mr. Nathan and the army arrives, and everyone finally realizes that Grace is the commander. My fascination with these Chinese drama shorts is not just about their exaggerated storylines and over-the-top characters, but also about the unique viewing experience they offer. Return of the Invincible Commander exemplifies this with a blend of absurdity and intrigue. Despite the sometimes confusing historical context, this series captivates with fast-paced drama and plot twist. These dramas, with their often silent scenes, just have an extra layer of intensity. The inaccuracies are easily overshadowed by the engaging storyline and the strong emotional pull. The experience is akin to watching a live-action comic book, where the visuals and dramatic moments keep you hooked despite the occasional logical leaps. Ultimately, my enjoyment of these dramas come from their ability to transport me into a world where every moment is heightened and every character plays their part in the grand tapestry of the story. Return of the Invincible Commander may have its flaws, but it delivers on the promise of entertainment, leaving me eagerly searching for the next series to dive into. If you haven't already, I highly recommend giving these short dramas a try. You might just find yourself as obsessed as I am.